Hello, I am Chemella Branch. Today we will discuss text complexity and why it matters. Here are our objectives for today. Please read them silently as I read aloud. The objectives are to know and understand that one of the key shifts in ELA is regular practice with complex text, to know and understand the importance of text complexity and why it matters, to know how to determine text complexity, to ensure that students engage in regular practice with complex text. Look at the questions on the slide. Now, you will have 5 minutes to discuss each question with the people who are sitting at your table. Be prepared to share out. The first question is, what is text complexity? Why does text complexity matter? Are your students engaged in regular practice with text complexity? You will answer these questions throughout the presentation as well. Now, I would like for you to visualize this experience that I'm about to share with you. I walked into my first college class, Political Science 101, eager to learn. For my inaugural college assignment, my professor asked the class to read the first 3 chapters of the textbook for the next class period. That night, I returned to my dorm room, determined to learn everything I could in those 3 chapters. I pulled out my textbook and highlighter. Growing up, that is what I always saw the older kids using when they read a textbook. In my naive 18-year-old mind, I believed the highlighter must have some magical powers that transport the words on the page directly to your brain. I assumed that if I just figured out the right words to highlight, then it would be easy for me to remember what I read. However, when I opened my textbook, it was unlike anything I had read in high school. Where were the pictures? Where were the definitions for the words in the margins? Where was the chapter summary at the end of each chapter? All of the things I relied on in high school to get me through a text were missing. I shrugged, pulled out my highlighter, and started highlighting. That is what college kids did to study, right? But what was I supposed to highlight? The bold words, the headings, important information? I wasn't sure. I started highlighting everything that looked important on the page. Before long, the page looked like this. I quickly realized I had no real game plan for reading this complicated textbook. I didn't know what to highlight or how to find the important information to study. The text simply overwhelmed me. Why text complexity matters. This student's experience with complex text lets us know that students are entering college unprepared to embrace and master complex text, which leads to frustration and impacts college graduation rates. Over the past 50 years, the text that students have encountered in middle and high school has decreased in complexity, while textbooks in colleges, universities, and the workplace have become more complex. As a result, too many students graduating from high school lack sufficient skills required to comprehend the text they encounter in college and the workplace. The authors of the Common Core State ELA standards have taken steps to ensure that greater attention is paid to gradually increasing the complexity of text students read and comprehend as they move through school. Why text complexity matters. Can I get a volunteer to read this slide? The average length of sentences in K-8 textbooks has declined from 20 to 14 words. I would like a volunteer in the back to read this slide. Why text complexity matters. Vocabulary demands have declined. Eighth grade textbooks are equivalent to former fifth grade texts. 12th grade anthologies are equivalent to former seventh grade texts. Why text complexity matters. May I have a volunteer on my right to read this slide? Students in college are expected to read complex texts with substantially greater independence than students in typical K-12 programs. It matters. Being able to read complex text independently and proficiently is essential for high achievement in college, the workplace, and important in numerous life tasks. Key shifts in ELA involve regular practice with complex texts and their academic language, reading, writing, and speaking grounded in evidence from text, both literary and informational. Building knowledge through content-rich nonfiction. What does this mean? Rather than focusing solely on the skills of reading and writing, the ELA and literacy standards highlight the growing complexity of the text students must read to be ready for the demands of college, career, and life. The standards call for a staircase of increasing complexity so that all students are ready for the demands on college and career level reading no later than the end of high school. The standards also outline a progressive development of reading comprehension so that students advancing through the grades are able to gain more from what they read. What is text complexity? Text complexity is what the term implies. How challenging is the material for the child at their specific grade level? Common Core standards use three factors to determine the complexity of a text: qualitative measures, quantitative measures, considerations relating to the reader and the task. Determining text complexity. One must determine the qualitative measures of the text. You must analyze the quantitative measures of the text, and you must reflect upon the reader and the task considerations. The first step in determining text complexity involves quantitative measures. Quantitative measures are word length, word frequency, word difficulty, sentence length, text cohesion. For example, if you change the name Benjamin to Ben in a story on a Lexile analyzer, the Lexile drops to 4th or 5th grade versus 9th or 10th grade. Quantitative measures are what publishers traditionally relied upon to determine the difficulty of a text. There are dozens of formulas used to figure text difficulty. Many of these formulas consider only two factors: sentence length and the number of difficult or unfamiliar words, or they look at sentence length and syllable count. Needless to say, these factors are fairly limiting when it comes to determining the complexity of a text. The second step in determining text complexity is qualitative measures. Qualitative measures involve levels of meaning, levels of purpose, structure, organization, language conventionality, language clarity, prior knowledge demands. Language measures or qualitative measures are on a continuum, not a grade band, and most useful in working in conjunction with quantitative measures. Reader and task considerations. Reader and task consideration involves motivation, knowledge and experience, purpose for reading, complexity of tasks assigned regarding text, complexity of questions asked regarding text. Considerations relating to the reader and task is the vital third component. Each reader brings different skills, background, and motivation to the act of reading. For example, a student who is interested in the topic being read is likely to bring more background knowledge to the reading task and want to learn more. The importance of the assignment itself can also influence the reading activity. Skimming a book or article for a key piece of information or reading leisurely places less demand on the reading task than if a student is preparing for an exam, assembling a piece of equipment, or reading for long-term retention. So, how do we determine a student's Lexile score? What does Lexile measure? What does it mean? A Lexile measure is a valuable piece of information about either an individual's reading ability or the difficulty of a text. Like a book or a magazine article, the Lexile measure is shown as a number with a capital L after it. 880 L is 880 Lexile. Lexile measures and the Lexile ranges above help to determine what text is appropriate for each grade band, what should be considered stretch text, text that moves students from their current level of reading and thinking. The Common Core standards devote as much attention to the text complexity of what students are reading as it does to how students read. As students advance through the grades, they must develop their comprehension skills and apply them to increasingly complex texts. The portion of the text that students read each year should come from a particular complexity band. Did you know? May I have a volunteer to read this slide? Workplace reading, measured in Lexiles, exceed grade 12 complexity significantly, although there is considerable variation. These are the Lexile levels of various reading materials and occupations in different career clusters. Here are some additional Lexile levels of more reading material and occupations in various career clusters. Please pay close attention to the different careers and the occupation and the reading materials and the Lexile scores. Look at how they align. Text complexity activity. As a small group, read, write figs, and respond to the questions provided. You will have 10 minutes in your small groups to read, write figs, and prepare to share out with the entire group. Now that you have read, write figs, let's discuss the questions provided. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the overall complexity of the text? What features of the text support your rating of its complexity? At what grade level might this text be appropriate for instruction, and why? So, how do we do it? Students need to be taught how to read and think about complex texts. Close reads provide students with an opportunity to connect with a text. Today we will watch a short video on how to conduct a close read. Please watch carefully. Let's watch an example of close reading. As you are watching, jot down the process you see the teacher using with her students. Once the video is finished, share your notes with others at your table. Come to a consensus at your table as to the process and the steps to close reading. Now that we have observed the video on close reading, we understand exactly what complex text is and the importance of complex text and why it matters. Now, let's revisit our objectives. Our objectives included to know and understand that one of the key shifts in ELA is regular practice with complex text, to know and understand the importance of text complexity and why it matters, to know how to determine text complexity, to ensure that students engage in regular practice with text complexity. Now, our session on text complexity is coming to a close, and I would like to thank everyone for their participation. However, before we end, I would like for you to use the sticky notes on your table to write 3 things that you learned today, 2 things that surprised you, and 1 question that you still have. On this question, please include your email address and someone will answer your question. Again, thank you for your participation. And remember, complex text matters.